Alrighty.
everybody. Welcome to Help the Helpers. And we have such an important, timely topic this morning of climate crisis, climate change, and finding hope for that. And a brand new person for me, Charles Williams, and and Monica, you're going to introduce Charles.
I will. It's my great pleasure to introduce Charles Williams, who is the lead teacher along with Starhawk, author and activist and permaculture teacher Starhawk. So Charles teaches earth activist training, and I will let him tell you a little bit about that. And tomorrow begins a particular class around climate change, climate crisis, but what we can do about it. So this is really all about hope and action and feeling powerful. So feeling our power in response to climate and what we can actually do about it. So without further ado, Charles Williams.
Hello, everybody. It's great to be here with you all. Thanks for inviting me to come join you this morning. I think what I'd like to do before I leap into who I am and what I do, maybe if we just take a moment and settle in here. In my tradition, we call it grounding. I understand you all might have different terms for like getting yourself here. So again, my name is Charles Williams. I come to you from Mi'kma'ki, the traditional unceded territory of Mi'kmaq people, also called Nova Scotia. And I invite you just to put your feet on the ground or just feel wherever you're sitting or laying or however you are being right now, just feel gravity. And feel the parts of you that touch something that touches the ground down deep below. And feel that tug of the world. Science says gravity, I say love, whatever you want to call it, that thing that invites us down in. I invite you to put some roots down from wherever you are. Maybe it's the root of your feet, maybe it's coming from the base of your spine, but imagine a tendril, a cord, a little shoot that heads down into the earth wherever you are and into the soil. With a deep breath, breathe it down easy between soil particles, through damp ground. Maybe it's sleepy winter ground, maybe it's warmer, depending where you are. But just allow it to go down into the rich earth below us. Breathe it down. Maybe little tendrils head off to taste, smell, touch the world around us. And the earth is alive, full of energy. And let's just draw some of that up. I invite you just to breathe it up. Imagine like through a straw. You can just breathe some of the earth energy up through that thread that connects you to the earth, up into your feet and into your legs. The energy of your home, knees and hips and belly. Invite some of the energy of this place up into you, arms, shoulders, swirling in your chest around your heart, your neck. Can you connect with the place you call home? Draw some of the energy of that up until you're full. Let it fill you like a cup of water, all the way to the top. Allowing you to be present and here. And when you're ready, let it sprout out of your head like a little unfurling leaf from a tree, reaching up to make branches, reaching out past windows and walls and ceiling up into the air, feeling the breeze. And can you draw in some of that sunlight, that morning light, maybe bright with the sun or coming through clouds? Just breathe some of that in, down into your body. And feel it mix with the earth energy, allowing you to be here now, today, in this moment. I invite you to notice what it feels like to be grounded here in this moment. And notice what you hear. Do you hear anything? Maybe there are birds around you. Maybe there's a hum of the world. Allow your immediate world to sound around you. Notice if there's anything you smell or taste. Maybe there's a little leftover breakfast or coffee or tea. Notice how your body feels. Maybe there's a warm side where the sun strikes it, or there's a breeze, or your clothes, how they hang on your body. Just notice how you feel in your body here. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. Notice what you see. You're probably in a familiar place, somewhere you know well. Notice if there's anything new that catches your eye, or something you've seen 1,000 times that draws your attention in this exact moment. Let's just be grateful for the world we live in the place we call home. With gratitude, I say welcome and hello. So my name is Charles Williams. I teach with Earth Activist Training, and we are a permaculture teaching organization that focuses on solutions. Like, what can we do to make the world a better place? In the physical world, the things that we touch and the plants that we grow and the way we make our buildings and the way we design transportation or whatever we do. But how do we have a world that we're both excited to live in and that will live long past us? We have a course coming up called Permaculture for Climate Activists, and that's what I was asked here to talk about. And it's a short class, 3 sessions for the next 3 weeks, that we look at what are the solutions that are out there, what can we do. And some of the things are like, what can we do personally, like what can we individually do in our lives, and some things are what we can do collectively, because there's a lot of hope in the world of climate despair. Because I don't know about you, but for me, there's a feeling of heaviness. Like, we talk about climate and like it seems like a huge problem. Like, what can we do as individuals? What can we do in our neighborhoods, or our states or provinces or countries? Like, what can we do? And this class talks about what are the solutions. What is the problem? How can we conceive of it? Because I think understanding the problem is key to becoming able to solve it. So if we want to solve our climate issue, or at least engage with it, we need to have the right frame to understand what it is. If our frame is, it's bad, it's horrible, it's big, and we can't do anything, there's no solution to that. But if we frame it differently and we approach it differently, we can approach the solutions. And that's the work that we do with Earth Activist Trainings. We look at how do we as people make a difference, and what can we do? And some of it will be things we do in our lives, and some of it will be things that we advocate for, whether it's working with political officials, whether it's like what we buy in the store, whether it's like how we orient our lives. So that's briefly what it's about. I want to play you a little clip from my co-teacher, Starhawk, who has a great way of talking about how do we frame it up. So if you'll bear with me for a moment. We'll play that clip, and then I think there'll be some breakout groups.
We frame climate change not just as carbon in the atmosphere, but frame it as massive ecosystem degradation. It is the planet telling us that we have messed things up on an enormous scale. That, I find, is actually a hopeful frame, because if we frame it that way, we can look at some of the causes. Deforestation, desertification, that we might not at first glance think are part of climate change, are actually part of that assault on the Earth's regulatory systems. And then the cure is regenerate ecosystems. And the good thing is that we actually know how to do that. And there are many inspiring examples of where that's been done on a very large scale. One of the best examples is China's Laos Plateau. This is an area that once was enormously fertile soil. It was the original homeland of the Chinese people. By the mid 20th century, it had become very, very degraded and desertified. So the Chinese government instituted a whole program of regeneration. And they used a lot of the techniques and tools that we talk about in permaculture, ways to sculpt the land to capture more water, and slow and spread and sink that water. And they've had a tremendous success with it. We frame climate change not just as carbon in the atmosphere, but...
Thank you so much, Charles. Perhaps we could have some discussion and questions, Lynn?
Yes, the video seemed to cut off right when she was saying it's not just carbon in the atmosphere, but, and I wondered if Charles could finish that sentence.
It was starting to loop around. It was coming back to what she said at the beginning. Basically, what it is if we frame climate change instead of like carbon in the atmosphere, which is often how it's framed, like climate change is this carbon in the atmosphere problem. If we frame it as climate change is massive ecosystem degradation, it's the Earth's regulatory system has broken down. Though that seems like an colossal problem, it allows us to look at climate change and the solutions, saying, oh, what we have to do is regenerate the ecosystems around the planet. So I know you all work with people and like have, especially people with dysregulated systems, like you try to bring the systems back into regulation. The same is true for the planet. If it's about carbon, then all we're looking at like pulling carbon out or putting carbon in, and we're like really struggling with this one little piece. But if we look at it as ecosystem regeneration, then there's things we can do in our home areas. Like where can we get ecosystems working better in our local area? Where can we get them working better in our country? Like ecosystems are everywhere and we can make them work better. We know how to do this. So that's what she's talking about.
Oh, thank you for ending that sentence for me.
Thank you.
I had heard, I think when David Attenborough has these wonderful series, and that the main thing, or one of the best things we can do is plant a tree, but we can also plant gardens and anything with green things in our cities.
Absolutely.
So maybe we can open it up and see how that impacts on us as a group, and questions that you might have.
I'm just curious whether you're familiar with, or I'm sure you are, with biodynamic farming.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. And biodynamics is great. It's there's many wonderful styles of farming, and biodynamics is one of them. And it does have a role to play if we're talking about like climate. It also has a role to play like in soil fertility, and there's lots of great things about it. So it is, doing more biodynamic farming versus industrial farming definitely is an improvement, and moving in that direction is great.
And it seems to foster community, from my understanding.
Yes. Yeah.
Anyway, thank you for your presentation. I'm with you 150%.
Can you say a little bit more, Liz and Charles, about this form of farming? So we can
Well, I'll just say a little bit. I think the way they're composting the earth is very interesting. They also plant according to the planets. And for the compost, they cut off the horns of cows and fill it with particular ingredients, I forget what, and then bury it and allow it to process, and then they use that to fertilize the ground.
Yeah. So biodynamics was started by Rudolf Steiner, the same person who did Waldorf schools and the Camp Hill communities. So there's a kind of a mystical part, and there's kind of a science part, but it's an integrated way of growing plants that that has an understanding that it's not about just a plant by itself, that they live in a larger kind of energetic system in which you do preparations that help the soil and help the plants, and you pay really close attention to what's going on in the world around to make more successful farming. And there's a huge community component, as all of Steiner's work has a community, kind of a communal health component also.
Yours and Starhawk's work has the community aspect as well, Charles, right? And also activism, ceremony, and permaculture, that combination. Maybe you could say a little bit about that.
There's no way to solve our problems without understanding that we live on a living planet that has kind of social components and spiritual components, and we're trying to engage those together and say, oh, how can we as whole people make a difference? And how do we take the science, which is often what we find in communities are solution focused, but they don't always understand the power structures that activists understand. And we've tried to bring those together to say, oh, there's these power structures that really keep things from happening. There are things called racism, and there are things, there's politics, and there's these structures that often keep the pure kind of science, like, oh, we can do these things. Like, here's how you plant a seed, how you get it to grow. But how do you scale it up is you bring those two things together, and you do it in community, because nothing can be done alone. And so we bring that together in spirit and community. And that's how we see a difference being made.
You were saying, Charles, before that as helpers, we know about restoring the system, and we're thinking more and more as helpers about human beings, not only as individual isolated people, but that we are, as Jean Genlin says, we are interaction, we're a system. And so it makes so much sense to me that that our problems are systemic problems, and that we are a system to try to solve those problems.
I'd be curious what the bridge is between the tools you use in solving and supporting people and the ones that we use for solving and supporting some of the climate issues. I imagine some of them are very similar because we're talking about healing systems, right?
Yeah, one of the main tools that we use as helpers is a deep embodied listening. And I'm imagining we also have to listen to the earth. We also have to respond to what it needs, what it wants.
Absolutely.
Just to tag along what Lynn just said, and an attention to what develops by itself organically due to the biological intelligence of the body, like really paying attention to that. So in that sense, I think some of the even new or older therapeutic approaches pay attention to the microscopic, minute moments that transform wholes without really knowing in the moment. And that's not true for everybody. Most people in therapy may think that they go to talk about something. So again, that separation between the you and the something that needs to be addressed, instead of just being with the something that's alive in the moment. So in that sense, you could say that we can look at the body as a field they can use a lot of regeneration constantly. Yeah.
I love that, because that's what kind of ecological restoration is based on, like, attunement, really observing, just understanding what's going on, because you can't heal something you don't understand. There's a lot of kind of engineered techniques that are like borrowed from one place and like stuck in another, and they don't fit. It's like, oh, you need to look at the actual place and what's going on. And most often there's small changes that have big impacts, and trying to figure out what those are, what can we do to, just planting a few things, or creating a little more space, or sometimes it's the introduction of something new, ecosystem wise. If you've ever seen what happened in Yellowstone, they introduced like a wolf back, and that completely changed the ecosystem and healed it in many ways that nobody could predict. But it was like one small change that made this big impact.
Okay, I'll say something again. So what comes to mind also, the way Liz mentioned biodynamics, farming, you must know about this guy that's in Brazil, regenerated a whole land, Ernst something. Why do I bring him here? I think he did it over a 40-year period, and in the beginning he did it mostly alone, but the first thing that he had to pay attention was the soil, right? The depleted soil probably is the thing that requires the most attention in the beginning. That's also interesting.
Yeah. Oh, it's the foundation of all living things, like soil. Like it's what we have to look at always. You always have to look at the soil early on, and continuing. It's like basic health. Like, if you have a really bad diet, it's really hard to heal some of the other things. Like, you have to take care of some of the basic things and maintain that. And he did a great job in Brazil. Some amazing work.
I think you spoke about the science, and one of the things I hear is happening is in the scientific world is trying to help species to migrate where it is safer for them to develop. By species, I mean animal like turtles, but also trees, the huge sequoia trees that Americans have. Now, about that, I have mixed feelings, and because it is, a kind of intervention that it's huge and that may have an impact on nature that we are not able to foresee. So I would like to hear your opinion about that. Do we have to help nature to relocate where it is safer for it to grow due to climate change, or should we restrain ourselves and let nature do its course without our its journey without our intervention?
I think there's multiple approaches. I think I'd start to say that humans have impact and always have, and continue to have impact on all ecosystems. The question is, how are we going to do it? Whether you look at indigenous technologies, where there used to be burning and landscape augmentation, that's how landscapes that settlers came into North America. I'm assuming most people are in North America. Were managed landscapes, and how we manage them now will impact what they are. So we need to think about it, whether we're helping species move or not, whether we're preserving spaces or we're moving spaces. We need to think about it, because we have such a huge role, humans do. There's no place on the planet that isn't impacted by human activity. So there's no place on the planet that management isn't appropriate. Sometimes management is light, where we say, no, these are old growth forests. We're not going to relocate those. Like, keep them. If they're old growth spaces, don't move them. Don't try to move them. Keep them where they are. There might be a need for some species that have gotten isolated to have corridors. You know, the idea is less that you want to take a whole species and move it somewhere else, but to give them connectivity between spaces that they might want to occupy. So how do we deal with roads? How do we deal with spaces like, and there are answers to these questions. They're not hard and they're not impossible to conceive of. And as climate change happens, species will need to migrate, whether they're plants or animals, to fit growing climatic changes. And we have to support that if we want them to continue. Like there is a general idea that there's a responsibility to the intervener. So if you go into an environment and intervene in the environment, you become responsible for all the things you've disrupted. You put a dam on a river that doesn't allow salmon to go upriver, then you become responsible for making sure the salmon survive. So if we are dividing up species in the way that they won't survive, like we become responsible as humans. Because we're the ones who caused the problem, right? So we have to find ways in which to be the solution. Sometimes that's movement, actually picking up and moving things. Sometimes it's connectivity, and sometimes it's actually keeping them in place and protecting those spaces. And it's specific to the situation. Like say, oh, we're going to preserve this place, but it's become inhospitable. It may not be the right choice. So all that said, there's also a thing called invasive species, and we want to be very careful when we move things to new spaces, because not all things play nice together. So you start slow and you observe a lot before you jump into like moving masses of things far distances.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
You're saying, Charles, that wherever we are, we can plant something.
We can, wherever we are, we can plant something, or we can support things being planted. So I live in a city. Right now, I'm sitting on the fourth floor of an apartment, and the apartment I live in has no lawn. It has no grass. There's no spaces to plant anything. There just isn't. That's where I live. But I live in a city that has green spaces. They have parks. They have street trees. They have policies around zoning. So engaging in any of those things, like getting the city to plant more street trees and to maintain them, not run them over with snowplows, which is sad to me when it happens. But planting trees and maintaining trees and supporting people to maintain trees in the city help health. Like people are happier when there's trees around, and they're happier when they're doing what, like that green space we can grow in a city, because cities have streets and they have boulevards, a little space between the sidewalk and the street that can be planted up. Sometimes they have 2-lane streets with a little green space in between them. Planting those up, getting more trees and growing things in the cities, getting parks to allow community gardens so people can grow food, so you don't have to truck it. One of the challenges is movement of food. Where can we get people to be engaged with the landscape? Can we have some of the public spaces be allocated in a way people can engage? There's a lot of open space in and around our cities that we can support. And in our own kind of in world, we can have plants that are growing inside. We can support composting operations, like actually putting our compost in our green bin if you have one, or whatever the system is like trying to get into a compost system that compost can be used in your urban environment. Like people use the compost that's made by cities. So supporting all that can make a huge difference. We can change how support the change to mass transit versus individual cars. Like I drive an individual car, but when I can use mass transit, it's great. My city really has kind of shoddy mass transit. It makes it hard. So advocating for there to be better mass transit so we can use them to actually do things we need to do in our lives, that can make a big climate difference. There's a lot we can do, both behaviorally, but also in our environment, where we can support that change, even if we don't have a lot of space.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Charles, for bringing up this so very important topic. And thank you for all the practical things that you're doing, that I hear you're doing with this course, and bringing consciousness and teaching people practical ways of doing this, because we need that too. And at the same time, I'm thinking, and I always think about this, how else we can bring, and this is something that in the focusing world is so important, how do we help people connect more? Because I have this belief that the more we connect with ourselves, the more we connect with everything else. We are body environment. So when we are more connected, we feel more for all the earth, the universe, every being. So my question is, how do we carry that forward in other ways too, with the very practical ways? And maybe this is a question about, I don't know, how, if you do that, how do you do that, and how can we do that and further that?
Well, I think this room probably has a wealth of knowledge about how to connect. Like, it seems like there's many brilliant people that I would love to hear from everybody about how they see connection happen. The work that I do a lot of connection to the natural world. So I have skills in that area, but I think this group probably has a lot of skills about how do we connect people and place. And I think that'd be a great conversation for all. So, but I think the biggest way to connect is to actually get out. Get out and get around the things we want to connect to. It's really hard to connect when we're isolated. Can we get outside even for a little bit and be out, find a tree, hang out under it, find a park bench, feed the birds, go for a walk. Like, that helps you connect with the natural world the more you get out. And how do you connect with people? I think it's actually getting in proximity to them. Sometimes it's digitally and a lot of times it's personally, but I think connection requires engagement and helping ourselves get out of isolation, and that's hard, or it can be. Some people find it easy, some find it hard, but I think that's the essence of some of it.
One of the things that I'm noticing about this discussion and about your approach, Charles, is that it's about what we can do or want to do rather than only giving up things. And many times people think of climate crisis as a mandate to stop traveling, not buy cars, not eat meat, all of these things that we shouldn't do. And then we can also become judgmental about other people who do them, that they're supporting all of these detrimental things to the earth. And I think that that's sort of like taking care of our bodies. When I go on diets that in my life that don't eat this, don't eat that, don't eat between this hour and that hour, I get very discouraged and give it up. But if I go on kinds of diets where it says, oh, eat more vegetables, eat more fruits, really taste what you eat, I think that I do much better. And I think that that just being able to talk about climate issues is so important. Talk about it in ways that connects us rather than ways that separate us from each other, and thinking about ways that we are already connected and want to be connected. There's a meditation that I listen to every morning with Brother David Stendel-Rast, and in this little meditation he says, look at the sky. We so rarely look at the sky. We so rarely note how different it is from one moment to another. We only think of weather as good weather and bad weather, but this weather right now is something that may never be here again, and I'm always inspired to look at the sky, and that connects me to nature.
I think there's a truth in both the positive outlook, but also to make a difference. Like, climate is a big issue. Like, our ecological collapse is a big issue. We need a movement. We need people to be in it. And it's really hard to make a movement when you're like, be unhappy. Like, that is not a movement slogan. Like, it's not one that builds. I've done work with some amazing street activists. I remember talking with one who very staunch, like, we need to give up. People have to stop all these things. We should be eating rats instead of any other food. And like, and I was like, we can't make a movement on that. I have a sister, and she was she's very mainstream. And I'm like, if I think about them, if I can get them on board, like, then we're making headway. But if I can't, then it's not a movement that's going to work. Like, how do we get a movement that says, yes, this is great, there are solutions and we can do it, and it doesn't have to be hard, and it can be beautiful, and it can be successful. It's really hard to do a movement that is about just pure austerity, unless you have some really inspiring reason why that makes your life better. And there are some things I think we give up in our lives get better, but in general, I think there's a lot of ways we can just say, let's just make the world a better place. And how do we do it? And have it be enjoyable instead of hard. And then we can talk about the details, like, like red meat versus chicken versus fish, and we can go around, but it needs to be engageable. I see the clock.
Yeah, maybe we could do the connection rooms, Lynn.
We can have till 9 o'clock. I think we're doing good on time. Thank
Okay,
you,
great.
Katerina, for your clock. It feels like we're just getting warmed up here. So let's give ourselves till 9 or 5 after 9.
Charles, you teach a social permaculture course as well, right?
Yes, yeah. We teach a number of courses, and there's some social ones that talk about how do we socially organize ourselves, how do we work in small groups, especially how do we work in non-hierarchical groups. We also teach a course on facilitation, like how do we facilitate meetings and consensus process. And so we try to teach the social ones because they're just as important as the ecological ones if we want to make a difference.
Charles. Yeah, and I just liked even the words Lynn mentioned, that we were just warming up, which is kind of a nice way of moving into a resonance of, remembering beauty and all of those things that I suppose as individuals, we listen to our own being, we call it a felt sense. And from that, then bringing some presence to places in us that aren't moving, so just in your talk and presentation, it's kind of like feeling into where the conversation between beings, just human beings and other beings, the climate, or being part of just a bigger sense of the world that we're in, so I'm curious about that, just how I suppose, how to remind ourselves, that in a new world, or the world is so beautiful in places. All I need to do is put down some seeds and it'll grow itself, and that in myself as well, hope and creativity and beauty and forgiveness and all of those other things that make me feel warm, so yeah, it's kind of having information or conversations about that get me excited, because when I hear climate change, I get so hopeless. So I'm warming up, so it's lovely. And spring is warming up, so yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, part of it is we talk about the solutions and what we can do. We talk about the problems some. But we also start everyone the same way we started today, with a grounding and a connecting and an honoring of the things we're grateful for. Like, that's part of all what we do. It's not just our heads. Like, we need to have the rest of our bodies involved and our spirits involved, or it doesn't take. It's just a heady activity. Like, we need to be engaged on all of our levels to make a difference in ourselves, but also in our communities. And that's our activism work. Is how do we get involved in our communities?
Sure. And what I'm struck by is how active I am now with, it's not either one community or another community. It's like, maybe you're coming in and with an idea that we all know each other and we share, and we kind of have a collective identity, under focusing that. But it's like, God, we all want the same thing and so much, so it's lovely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Could you say more about the social aspect? I'll just make comments now and again when, the weather is warmer than it ought to be, that, yeah, it's nice, but I'm worried. It worries me. And people don't respond. They don't, it's like, I don't know, they haven't noticed or something. Or just don't want to talk about it, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I think there's lots of reasons people, it's a topic that I think brings a lot of despair for some folks. I think there's some political strains of people who have politicized it where it's a marker, not so much a belief, but it's a marker of belonging, where it's like, oh, I belong to this group that doesn't believe in climate change, and they're not willing to look at anything else because it is how they get belonging. It's one of the worries I have about the kind of politicization of things right now, is there are certain things that I think rational people would be like, oh yeah, I see that happening. Like there's more fires, or like there's been flooding, and you can see it. It's not a myth. It's not hard to notice. But they're like, oh, this marker makes me part of this group, and I don't want to be alone. I want to be part of this group. So I'll agree with this thing that intellectually it makes a hard conversation. And you're like, oh, am I part of this group or not? So I think there's some of that when we talk about when people don't want to respond or have a hard time, because it's been so politicized past like what's actually going on, which isn't a political thing. Like climate change isn't a political thing, it's a ecological thing. But we politicize it in a certain way, which makes conversation harder. So our social permaculture work is, depending on which class it is, some of it's around like how do we organize in groups and get them working together, and other ones are about understanding how some of the forces, some of them are very much structural forces, like what are the ground rules and how they work, and some of them are not, like oppressions and power, and how do we deal with conflict, because conflict comes up regardless of what group you're in, doesn't matter your political stripe. How do you deal when conflict comes up, or how do you work with touchy subjects? So we try to touch on a lot of that in our courses, our social courses, because as social beings, we run into conflict, and we run into how do we make decisions, and we run into like power and privilege. And sometimes we find that we're the ones with power and privilege, or sometimes we find that we're not the ones with power and privilege. And like, how do we negotiate when we're on either end? And sometimes we're kind of on that spectrum. So yeah, that's our social courses deal with a wide range of topics that we encounter as people walking through the world, and what are some of the tools. So we really look at what are tools and strategies for success.
It's inspiring. I also want to say, Nancy, that I think a lot of times people don't respond when you talk about the worries, because people feel guilty. It's like, we fucked up the planet. I'm still going on vacation in a car or a plane. And that guilt, we think, I learned this as a very young person, when I would point out what my partner did to hurt me. And I would always think that was going to make it better if my partner felt guilty, and it always made it worse. And I actually remember learning that. And guilt doesn't make things better. People don't change because they feel guilty. They change because they feel inspired to change. At least that's been my experience. And I guess it's our experience as therapists that we don't make our clients feel guilty about their problems or the problems they're causing. We help them to feel empowered to make changes.
I love that, Lynn. I just love that. That is what we do to ourselves, to whip ourselves into shape, so thanks for it's a lovely reminder. Thank you.
I want to say something about what Lynn said, because I found for myself that the way I was able to engage more and more into becoming an activist was to find meaning in small things that I wasn't able really to focus on when I was going more mainstream. So as I said here before, the time of pandemic was a huge occasion for me to stop and really paying attention to small things. And that's when I started to do composting on my balcony. And from there, developing a whole series of actions. Because you start with composting, and then you have to grow something with your composting. And so now I go to in my town. I'm in Rome, in Italy, and I have a park in front of me. So I go to collect acorns. And I plant acorns around the border of the street where I see that there is a chance for them to grow. So, but the fact is that this small thing that is doing composting is so symbolic for me. I mean, it's a whole way to connect with nature and the regenerating of nature that I am actively part in. But the other thing I want to say at a more theoretical level, I think if we want to build what I call first-person sustainability, we really have to start crossing science and experiencing. We cannot keep on splitting the two, saying, oh, science is materialistic and mechanicist, and we are spiritual people, for example. You know, all these split have, in my opinion, to end. We have to start crossing in ourselves what's outside and what's inside, the outer and inner dimensions, and find meaning, personal meaning in what science tells us as true. If we keep on splitting the scientific truth and the personal truth, we are not going to end up anywhere.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm thinking maybe we have time for one more comment, and then we'll go into our breakout rooms. What do you think? Ready? But I have the feeling that one or two more people are getting ready to say something. So
yeah, just very briefly, this is that I'm thinking that as I'm listening, sometimes I'm finding myself getting joyful and excited and feeling, oh, this is such a wonderful, and I have this joyful, happy energy that's motivating me. And other times I feel I listen and I find, oh God, I have to do this. And I think that's a body sense that we can learn to be attuned to. Is this conversation I'm having generating this joy? Oh, we can plant a tree. Oh, we can go out and find some greenery and make it. Oh, we can compost and then grow something. Then that has a whole joyful sense to it. Oh, we should be doing this and we're not doing that. And why are we doing this? And why aren't we not worrying about this when we should be worrying about it? That closes me up. And I think I want just to be noticing when I close up and when I open up, because I think we want to move more in the direction of opening up and creating all this. How are we engaging with this issue, and how is it affecting us on a body level? So that's, just want to throw that out.
Yeah, if I may respond to both Charles and Meg, I love that to look at our how our bodies feel, but all this understanding that there's all these ways of knowing. Like science is one way of knowing, but it's not the only way, right? Like, you know, we know with our bodies, and it's not about like, oh, I did the scientific experiment. You're like, oh no, that feels bad. Ugh, like I don't want to do that. So like, there's all these ways of knowing, and to validate them, to validate that there are multiple ways of knowing, and to have people in our communities and groups feel empowered to have their way of knowing also be valuable. Whether you come from, Western, or if you're an indigenous group, you different ways of knowing, or if you're one gender or another gender, you may have different ways of knowing that come from, like, there's so many ways of knowing, and finding those ways to allow people's knowing to inform their action that is meaningful for them is really important. So in our work, we try to talk about like what we know as teachers, but allow space for people to have other ways to know and come to solutions, because there's so many of them, and we don't have to do them all. We just have to do, all of us just have to do some. We don't all have to do all, and there's no way we could. And I want to be able to support you doing yours if you support me doing mine, and they might be completely different, but they all move steps forward, right? So how do we do that? I think it's really important to allow for that.
Thank you very much. I think this is a good place here to pause and to take this conversation into our small groups. And we'll come back at 9:30 and share what we came up with in our groups.
Lynn, can I just say thank you to everybody? I'm going to have to hop off. I have another meeting that started a couple minutes ago, but I'm going to hop off. It's been really great talking with you all and seeing you all here, and meeting you all. I hope some of you come and join our course, or at least check out our website and see if there's things that speak to you. But I wish you all the best and good luck in the work that you do.
Thank you so much, Charles. We really appreciate this.
Thank you, Charles.
Thank you, Monica.
Thank you.
What did you discuss in your breakout rooms? How was it talking about this issue in a small group?
The issue grew out of the issue into other branches and gave birth to a very warm exchange that was mostly about connection, I would say.
That's interesting that the that the issue of nature and climate sort of expanded into connection and warm feelings.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciated that about our reflection today, the continuity of our human connectedness and our connectedness to nature.
My partner and I kind of came to the same conclusion. We shared a camaraderie, and we both expressed not satisfaction, but a comforting knowing there are others that think along these terms. So there's a certain comfort in speaking to others that share these values. We left our session more hopeful. At least I'll speak for myself. I left more hopeful.
Yeah, it feels good to feel like we're allowed to feel hopeful.
Yeah.
There's a kind of a strand of social something or other that says, you're feeling hopeful is like fiddling while Rome is burning, and don't feel hopeful. Which I don't.
I love that, Lynn. and adding to what Robert said, it was like there was at the beginning this, and there's always this about this issue, the feeling of certain hopelessness, and then also this, and I was reminded of what Jen says, that life will go on as it can. We don't know how. Maybe some species are going to be extinct, but life is going to go on, and maybe the earth is going to go on in another way. I don't know, but that is the certain hope about that.
Yes, the knowing that that life wants more life, is the way Jean puts it.
Left kind of with me feeling kind of stuck. I was trying to think of instead of just responding to this beautiful weather about, wow, it's so beautiful. I'm enjoying it, but it worries me, to have something more positive to say than it's worrying me, that's not guilt producing, or but that might be something that could be said that would be encouraging. And I got stuck. So if anybody's got some ideas, that would be helpful.
What could Nancy say that would spur more conversation?
Yeah, especially amongst the younger population. I'm thinking of my grandkids who are now young adults. I mean, some of the older ones are stuck in different political ways. And I don't know that they're as stuck anymore, but you know, there's that, some of the political stuff is there. But I don't, you know, the grandkids aren't. They're much more open and flexible.
Well, Nancy, what do they tell you? I think their view would be very interesting.
I don't know. We really haven't had a discussion on the environment.
I would love to know what they think.
Mm-hmm.
They're seeing it from a totally different perspective.
Their lives, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we're all kind of heading out, you know, just to be truthful. So, you know, we see one thing, but I'm very curious about the younger people.
That's a good point, that sometimes just the being open and inquiring can generate conversation. To say, it makes me a little worried. Does it make you worried, or are you just happy because you're used to it? How, you know, how does it seem to you and your generation?
Why would you even bring up the worried bit? Let's see how it comes out of them. What do you think? What is your, I mean, you know, I just to find out if they're worried. What if they're not worried? Maybe we should make them worried, but I don't know.
You know what I can add? What I can add here, Cassel, is that I've been sharing lots of time with my son and lots of his friends, and so many of them, and I have heard this from other people from that generation, that they are thinking about, and I was sharing this in my breakout room, about not bringing children to this world because they are so worried that things are going badly and they will be even worse in the future. So this is what they're thinking. And at the same time, I think they are doing quite a lot because they are much more aware of these things. And they are, I don't know, they're helping clean beaches, helping in any way they can. And at the same time, knowing that the future might not be good here on Earth to bring up children. This is what I heard from them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, something that comes to mind with all of this is one phrase I heard in the United States when I first came as an immigrant, and I keep hearing this thing, when the day is beautiful, right? A very common thing I heard adults say is like, yeah, so what are you going to do with it? Or how are you going to use this beautiful day? And using a beautiful day is such an old-fashioned way of approaching a beautiful day, right? It's so it's a comment of the industrial era of conquering Earth and all of that. So I feel like, yeah, I'm into asking the new generations for new words, new approaches to, yeah, we've used the Earth way too much. Like, so how are we going to help in different ways? I don't know. I'm into this whole thing. I'm not a mother, so I would love to hear from, you know, there was a big discussion including grandmothering a few weeks ago, and I found it very inspiring. And I'm interested in what the young people have to say. Absolutely. And yes, it comes with not having kids these days a lot. So let's listen to that. Yeah.
Yes, I am also, and I started a group years ago, maybe 6 years ago or something, in my neighborhood called Generate, and it's an intergenerational discussion of everything. And I co-lead it with a young guy that I met at our coffee club. And once a month, we come together, the young people. First it was young people and older people, and now it's people in between also, but just talking about all kinds of topics, and just seeing how our perspectives might be the same and how they're different. I'd like to say this sounds a little like an advertisement, but I don't want it to. I'm going to be teaching a class on Thursdays, a new module of my Therapeutic Us course on facilitating groups. And anybody who would be interested in getting together a little neighborhood group to talk about everything, or to talk about climate, or whatever would interest you to bring people together. This module of the course will be helping people to facilitate groups in focusing oriented philosophy of group interaction. So you're welcome to join it. But I want to come back to what we were saying about, because I took us off a little bit, about really wanting to hear from the young people, and wanting to generate conversations about climate change with people in a way that doesn't put people on the defensive.
I'm grateful for that suggestion, Cassell. Instead of having some brilliant, not brilliant really, but comment to make, but to ask where they're at, what are their, what are they thinking about it? See if the time is right and the place is right, what I could do that. That's a very good suggestion.
I'm sure they talk about it in school. I mean, how old are your grandkids?
Well, these kids that I'm talking about are adults. They've graduated from college, and they have gotten jobs, and they're out beginning to start their careers and get their own apartments and that kind of thing. They're just moving out into the world.
I'm sure they think
some of them, and then some of them are still in school. But yeah, so good suggestion.
I'm going to try something. I don't know how whether I'll be successful in it. I'm just struck, Nancy. It's that when we talk from our being, just how are you? It's almost that anything that we introduce is a topic, and it's a feeling about something, So in the moment, it's like that. But what occurred in my breakout room, and the person isn't here, so I'm kind of reassuring myself that you don't know who it was, and that's true, Christine. You might know because you put us into it, but the person was incredibly distressed, and it's she was very angry about, and as when one is angry, they use. And it was a force to be reckoned with, and so I suggested maybe we just take a few minutes in the focusing way, and that was just so transformative, in that I felt safe, and I could get my breath back, and that other person found themselves, but the content was very hopeless. The content was very hopeless, and I suppose that's that's in the moment we can pick up something. I don't know whether that person felt better going away after hearing herself, but we have such skills. So it's like the transformative change might come in the moment, but it's nothing got to do with a topic, so. So I hope I managed that all right, So yeah, I was just struck by the value of the skills that we have, Yeah.
Yes. The value of listening. Wow.
Yes, yeah.
And the value of pausing.
That's it. That's where the transformation was in that instant. Yeah. And it belongs to us all. I think that's it. It's like, I'm glad that I shared that because it wasn't mine. It's like carrying something forward, So I'm glad that I had the safety to do that.
Well, I think that that's sort of a sub-theme that we have this morning, that in order to deal with these big issues, like climate crisis, we have to deal with the emotional impact and with the political impact that impacts the emotional impact, and that focusing really gives us a way of doing that. I'm wondering, Monica, if you have anything there, because you are friends with Charles and helped to bring him to us.
I'm just thrilled that, thank you, Lynn, that I'm really excited because I've wanted for a long time to bring these two worlds together, two of my worlds together, of focusing and all of you lovely people, and also permaculture, and my stepmother Starhawk, and Charles is such a wonderful teacher. And I'm completely thrilled of how engaging we were with Charles, and that it wasn't a stretch. It did not feel like a stretch after all.
Yeah, I think that's true. And Katerina, you helped bring this together. Are you feeling good about it?
Yes. And Dorothy is away, so I will make a poem.
Okay. They're ready for our poem.
We had a song, and Monica just now suggested the poem would be better, would be good, since
Yes, we have a quiet, contemplative feel right now, rather than a boisterous, exciting song.
So this is a poem about nature, and if the chat will work, I'll put it there as well. There. Oh, song to the elements. The great blue heron flies along the sacred hoop, wide, flowing wings. Earth beneath my feet meets the pulse of life, dancing, a gentle drummer. Fire from within me speaks a form ever changing, the dance of Shiva. My heart glows for you, swirling flows of happiness, the water of life. Here, there, watch the wind and leaves, wind and trees, wind all around me. Old cedar tree, living, healthy, wonderful, strong and fragrant wood. hands, eyes, mind, and heart shape the clear energy ball, form that speaks my truth. The great blue heron, soft dark wings in golden sky, golden wings in dark sky. That's a poem.
Thank you very much, Katerina. And
Very
thank you
beautiful.
all. And we'll see you next Monday, and Mia will be speaking with us.
Yes.
Have a good week.